And to help us look at the latest coming from that war is an international affairs analyst, Sam PHATEY. Good to have you join us.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's talk about the latest. We understand that Russia is now touting the idea of using nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And I just wanted to ask you how close you think we are in terms of witnessing another use of nuclear weapons since Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Look, I think, the world has come of age digitally and information-wise. It would be a very huge risk for Russia to deploy the use of any kind of chemical anti-nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Yes, Russia is a superpower, but the use of nuclear weapons would mean that automatically the world is going into a third world war. And, at the end of the day, Ukraine is very close to Russia. Them using a nuclear weapon may not mean that the Russian population or certain people that they are claiming to liberate are going to escape any kind of nuclear attack. Then the war in Ukraine in itself cannot and will not be justified. Russia will see a world united against it, and it will push itself towards further isolation. It is one of the countries that have been most sanctioned in the world right now as it stands. And so it doesn't want to risk that. And if Vladimir Putin does anything of that nature, it could mean the very beginning of the end of his rule and his power. It will be a very risky move. And I don't think, I will look at it more like a bluff, despite what is happening, despite their struggle in trying to capture Kiev.
And it's interesting you mentioned World War III, and I'll get to that shortly because that has been used several times in Russia. But what if Russia were to go through with this threat of a use of nuclear weapon? What should then be the response of the West? Should it be in kind as well?
Well, I would not want to say that the response of the West should be the use of nuclear weapons against Russia. But I do think that militarily, they don't have any other option but to form a coalition. This time, it's not just about supporting Ukraine. The use of any form of chemical or nuclear weapons in Ukraine, especially nuclear weapons, mean that the West is no longer safe. So in order for them to protect themselves, they would not have any other option but not to play the Cold War again, but to go in and also be part of the fight. And we may see what I would consider missile attacks against certain Russian military installations, military bases, against some of their technologies and even nuclear plants. So that is a very high possibility, but they will not have any other option but to respond. And if I was there to make a decision, I will militarily respond.
Let's talk about the use of the word World War III. This is not the first time it has been used in Russia. I think it's about the second time where they keep saying, look, this war could be the beginning of World War III. But if we look at the elements, there when you examine World War I or World War II, but let's look at World War II. It was apart from the fact that Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler invaded Poland, but there were issues around, pockets of wars around the world. There was the Second Ethiopian War. There was the Japanese border conflict. There was just Spanish Civil War was there as well. Do you see these elements that could lead to Third World War just because of this conflict or the war in Ukraine?
If Russia escalates this any further above currently the war crimes that have been committed towards civilians in Ukraine, and they use a nuclear weapon, then there's no doubt about it. Already, one thing is clear: is that coalitions have been formed. We can see Finland and Sweden more on the edge towards joining NATO. I know there have been a lot of analysis and a lot of debates about who is at fault. The United States poked Russia, and then Ukraine is facing the consequences of it, or NATO poked Russia, and Ukraine is facing the consequences of it. I understand the history that people are trying to bring across or trying to justify. The war right now in Ukraine is more like a Cold War. You have Ukrainian allies and supporters of President Zelensky giving him weapons. It's more like a Cold War. However, if it escalates any further and there is no military reaction from the West, then Russia and Vladimir Putin most especially will see that as a sign of weakness, and he'll be emboldened to take further actions or to keep escalating and to keep doing more. Now, but if there is military action and he knows that there will be military reaction to any further aggression, then he may tend to scale down, and he would have looked into more diplomatic means or options to settle the crisis. One thing is for sure, the West is doing everything that it can to make sure and ensure that Russia doesn't install a government in Kiev. I mean, if Russia installs a government in Kiev, then it is going to end up like Belize. And this is why Vladimir Putin from the onset do not want the Belizean president to be ousted. So there's a whole dynamics here at play. It makes
absolutely.
it a complicated.
And one wonders what the visit of Antonio Guterres would do in the heat of this war. I wish we had the time to talk about it, but my time is up. Thank you so much for talking to us, as always. Sam PHATEY, International Affairs Analyst.
My pleasure.